This week on the Communicators, West Virginia Senator Jay Rockefeller, chair of the Commerce, Science, and Transportation Subcommittee. He talks about cybersecurity legislation before the Senate and the nature of cyber threats.
Senator Jay Rockefeller, chairman of the Commerce Committee, you recently said that cybersecurity legislation is absolutely necessary now that citizens are at risk. Why do you say that?
Because it's true. I mean, George Bush's last director of national intelligence, which is the highest intelligence position in the country, and Obama's first one, said the same thing, and they continue to say it, that's the number one threat to the national security in existence. Bob Mueller says, within a year, he will be taking cybersecurity as a much more urgent problem for this country than loose nukes, ex-Soviet nuclear weapons.
Do you view cybersecurity or cyber attacks as terrorism?
I do. I mean, it's just terror. I view it as war. And I like to discipline myself in that thinking because it really is. I mean, if you're hacking into the Pentagon 3, 4, or 5 million times a day, and every senator's office, virtually all corporate America, something has to wake us up, and we're not awakened to it. And we started this cybersecurity bill. I'm impatient about it. We started this thing the day that before Obama was inaugurated. When he was elected, I knew that he was going to be interested in this. We got to Olympia Snow and I got to work, and we put out a bill. Then Joe Lieberman, Susan Collins came in, and it's just progressed and progressed and progressed. So it's virtually passable. We have to get some Republicans on board, but I think we can do that.
Senator Rockefeller, how similar is the current cybersecurity legislation being pushed by you and Senators Lieberman and Collins to the bill that you brought to the floor or brought to committee 3 years ago?
Very similar. Very similar. And it's, our bill was accepted by the leader, it was accepted by the White House. We did it with both Melissa Hathaway and Howard Schmidt after that. I mean, we have had thousands of meetings, either directly or through telecommunications, with all kinds of people. We've made adjustments. We just meet with so many people, and we've made so many tweaks, and just to get it so that it could pass. It's got to have critical infrastructure, which is what the Republican bill doesn't have now. But I think that will change. We've got to protect our federal situation, their so-called .gov. We got to do that, and then we've got to have a lot of research and development. We've got to develop a lot more talent for people who are up to speed on cybersecurity to keep up with other countries and other actors, and it's critically important. And I compare it to 9/11. I mean, except it's much more obvious than 9/11. 9/11, you suspected that there were people coming in and out of the country, and you didn't know, you couldn't keep up with their movements, but you had a bad feeling about it. And there would, something would go on in a Minneapolis FBI station, and it wouldn't get to headquarters, and then there were, dots to be connected, people living in certain houses in San Diego, and it was all very clear that something big was going to happen, but we didn't know. Here, we know, because it's happening. Warfare in cybersecurity is being waged, and we're losing. And it's 3,000 people died in 9/11. What if they unleash dams or poison water systems or just shut down grids, hospitals? Well, I mean, shut down air traffic control. So that on one of those soupy days, airplanes are just running into each other up in the sky. They could kill so many people so easily. And the miracle to me is that they haven't done it so far. And it's not to our credit. It's to the fact that it just hasn't happened. But it will.
Are you finding that these attacks are organized by nation states or by rogue agents?
Both. I mean, nation states would be the first priority, obviously. But, a 15-year-old kid living in Indonesia or living in Spokane, Washington, or Oregon, wherever, could be doing this. It just takes brains, facility, and a malicious intent.
What are you hearing from the so-called critical infrastructure businesses, the electric companies, et cetera, about the regulation? Senator McCain, as you know, called this a regulatory leviathan.
Yeah, and see, I just have a hard time with that, because electricity more or less runs every hospital, every business, every school, every home, every enterprise in this country, and therefore it's the security of the nation. If they can shut down grids, which they have done in selected places across the United States already, if they can shut that down on a broader scale, then critical infrastructure becomes just exactly that. It's the infrastructure that you absolutely have to protect. That number one priority is protecting critical infrastructure, because that's where people's lives are at risk. Where you really lose thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. Think if they got into the computer system of a dam and all the water was released, then all the people below that dam. They can do these things.
Do you think there's a need for a White House level cybersecurity czar?
No, and that was one of the first things we did. We had it in our original bill. I'm a little bit embarrassed about it because I don't like czars myself, but it was kind of the language of the day, and the first, I don't know who it was that criticized that, we just took it out. I mean, the history of the development of the bill has been the history of accommodation to industry, to other committees, to other people. You tweak. You can stay with your principles because it's not all that complicated. But your goals are clear: cybersecurity, critical infrastructure, protect the government, protect the overwhelming 85% of entities which are private, information sharing, public partnership with the private sector, all of which is good. It's not regulation. It's not. It's just called protection. It's keeping us safe, keeping us alive.
So when you hear Republicans criticize that this has been fast-tracked and the legislative process has been subverted, you disagree with that?
Well, I would say that we've been on a very slow track. I mean, I would have liked to have completed this a year and a half ago. As it is, it's going to be hard to get floor time already this year. But I take Republican criticism constructively, and the individuals in it, all of them whom I respect greatly, all of whom know what they're talking about. I've approached each one of them, so have others. I was on the Intelligence Committee when we started this, and I'm on the Commerce Committee and still on the Intelligence Committee, so I know a lot of these folks really well. And they're our allies. They just may not know it yet, or else we haven't done a good enough job in making ourselves clear. Also, it's sort of hung around, and legislation that hangs around a long time begins to lose momentum. I fear that.
Harry Reid, the majority leader, has said he wants to fast-track this. How did you get his attention on this issue?
Just simply by coming out with a bill. Olympia Snow and I came out with a bill, and we did it in very short order. In fact, we were writing the bill, I think Obama had been president more than 3 or 4 months that we had a bill written. And then, of course, we began talking with industry and all kinds of other groups and other committees and all of that, and then it's evolved from there. It's not the same as it was at the beginning in a lot of details, but in its basic principles, it's not changed a whit, with the one exception, and that is that we have to get people who do not believe that critical infrastructure, which is the great mass of American functionality, that has to be in the bill. That is not necessarily a debatable matter. You can't have cybersecurity without having critical infrastructure included.
Why is the Department of Homeland Security the right agency to monitor this?
Well, the least reason, I'd like to say, it's the only one that really can. In other words, the NSA couldn't do it. They have sort of CIA problems that way. But on the other hand, Homeland Security can cooperate as they are and even be a partner with NSA. I don't see Janet Napolitano when I don't see Keith Alexander at the same place, in the same conversation. We had a meeting just earlier this week, and they were both on the same page, both cooperating with each other. But somebody's got to take the lead, and Janet Napolitano, who I really trust in Homeland Security, which a lot of people look back at Katrina and say, oh, they didn't do that right, but they don't realize they have a superb intelligence unit, which has now been beefed up. So it's the right place to do it, and in fact, the only place that you can do it.
Now, some groups such as the ACLU or the Electronic Privacy Information Center have raised privacy concerns for individuals with this legislation.
And that would be automatic, wouldn't it? I mean, when I was chairman of the Intelligence Committee, we did FISA, which is, allowing all of those, in this case, 2 telecommunications companies to be able to go ahead and collect intelligence with their servers all around the world, from whence we got about 80% of our worldwide intelligence. But they've been sued for $40 or $50 billion. And so the question was, were we going to let them go ahead and do that and collect, or were we simply going to say, no, you can't do that, and protect privacy in absolute terms and put ourselves at risk? It was an easy decision for me. Not all Democrats agreed.
Now, Senator Rockefeller, just a few more questions. The chief of security for AT&T testified at the House recently, and he said that Congress, and he was worried about the ISPs and the Comcast and the AT&Ts of the world being lumped in with critical infrastructure. And he said, Congress and the administration have leadership roles to play in ensuring the U.S. continues to focus on technology innovation. Burdening the private sector with the cost of unnecessary and ineffective regulations and processes is contrary to that objective.
Well, if we were burdening the private sector with unnecessary and burdensome regulations and duplications, I would agree with them, but we're not. We're saying to the private sector, you do this, you do what you think, use your own imagination. If you can't, if you don't know what to do, we'll come help. But in essence, we leave it up to the private sector to do it, but then we hold them accountable for what they've done. So is that regulation, or is that being sure in this isn't like some kind of a business tax or something. We're talking about national life and death situations. And so companies that know what they're doing and they're already doing it, go right ahead. Fine with us. But if companies don't know how to do it quite, or are missing the point, we're watching, we're monitoring. It's not regulating, it's monitoring. If they need help, then we're going to be there to help them. And they'll want us to be there to help them, because they know how much they are at risk and what the results of that could be.
Senator Rockefeller, any funding issues with this legislation?
No, I mean, I say that pretty casually, don't I? I have to think it through fairly carefully. There'll be some, but the one thing about this is that in the end, people are just going to vote for it, even if it costs money. We just finished passing a transportation bill, as you and I are talking, on this day, and that cost money. And then everybody's saying, well, we can't do anything which costs money. But it was then bridges and roads and, the different kind of infrastructure, also critical, but in a different way. And it passed overwhelmingly, like 4-1, this morning with Republicans and Democrats voting together. I mean, the Congress knows what is really at stake in this country. And when you get an issue like cybersecurity, which is so threatening, which Lee Hamilton and Tom Kaine of the 9/11 Commission say you've just got to get it done, and it's got to be that original bill, like that original bill. It's got to have critical infrastructure in it. They say that specifically. All kinds of, input from people. I just don't see the money as a problem.
Have you looked at how other countries are managing their cybersecurity issues?
I haven't. I should have, but I haven't. I've just been so wrapped up in getting this done. And, Europe is very different, China is very different, India is very different, Brazil is very different. I'm not sure that it would have been useful. I think it will be useful for me to do that. But what I want to do is get a bill which has been vetted so many times by so many people, put in front of so many organizations and the technological community, the private sector community. I've given a lot of speeches to them, accepted their criticism, made changes. The staff that I work with on intelligence and commerce have done the same thing, and they have made changes. I mean, if you really want to get something done, don't insist on having it done exactly as you want. Don't compromise on the the 4 or 5 main principles, particularly critical infrastructure and information sharing, which is not as easy as it sounds, but public-private partnerships. That's what we do in America, and all kinds of things. So I feel pretty good about it.
And finally, Senator Rockefeller, I want to go back to the legislative timeline. We talked with Senators Collins and Lieberman last week, and they were pretty sure that this bill would move during this couple of weeks of Congress, and you seem to express some doubt about that.
Yeah, and I don't want to, and I wish they were right, and maybe I hope they are right. You always want to take a positive view. But floor time is hard in the Senate right now because of the political bickering back and forth and holds on things, and no, you can't talk about that, or we're not going to take that up, or you have to get 60 votes, or all this kind of thing. So I'm being cautious, and I want to be so certain that we really do get a tremendous buy-in from all parties, including the Republicans now that appear not to agree with what we say. I think maybe they don't feel as strongly as it appears that they feel. And I've had several of those conversations with several of those folks. And so we go to them. What can we do to make this more amenable? We can't compromise on critical infrastructure. That's just the really big stuff that makes this country go, blowing up power plants and all that stuff. But I think we'll work our way through that.
Senator Jay Rockefeller has been our guest on the Communicators. He is chairman of the Senate Commerce Committee, and we've been talking about cybersecurity.